Our fearless chair.
Awesome. Welcome to the very first Policy and Equity Committee meeting of 2023. I am acting chair, Mike Morosky, for the time being. As always, we're going to go around the room with a round of introductions, starting with Rob.
Barry Weinberg, board member.
Brand new member of the Policy Committee, who let me borrow this Bengals flair since I don't own any. Go Browns. Mike Morosky.
April, school board member.
Dan Hoying, general counsel.
Stephanie Scott, assistant general counsel.
Leslie Mooney, chair of Fairview Clifton German Language School LSCMC and vice president of GIBIS.
Abria Drummond, president of GIBIS, parent rep on LSCMC.
Kathy Crable, office of general counsel, executive secretary.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here. And we'll just dive right in. The very first item we need to do, so this is your Policy and Equity Committee for 2023. One returning member, Ms. Bolton, and myself, and then our new member, Mary Weinberg. So we need to elect a chair for this year. So I will take nominations now.
I nominate Mike Morosky.
Eve, you were going to use something.
Well, I was going to do this, but the crowd is too small for this. To nominate Mr. Morosky.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we need one person's edification and other people's edification for the minutes? We do this then, we present the waiver to the board, and then we approve it if we decide to. So go ahead, Ms. Mooney.
Here. Well, thank you very much. Yes, as Chair Morosky has said, Fairview Clifton German Language School, GIBIS, which stands for German English Bilingual Alternative School, which is our PTO, it will be putting on our, it's decades old spring fundraiser, all volunteer driven, involves dozens of parents, teachers, community members volunteering. We call it Foshing. So it's based in German tradition. And this year we would like to include a beer garden with real beer. So we are seeking an F permit, beer only sales from the state, which is we need the board sign off as property owner. There are usually anywhere from 500 to 1,000 people, depending on weather and time of year and all that good stuff. The event this year is on March 18th. It'll be from noon to 5. We're planning to partner with High Grain Brewery to supply the beer, and there's some good Fairview connections there with parents and former parents who own and operate that brewery. And what else can I tell you? That's sort of it in a nutshell. We would love the opportunity to increase the money that we raise on behalf of the school. All of the funds that come into Foshing, which is usually anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000, goes right back into the school, predominantly to teacher wish list items. Teachers are awarded up to $400 for returning teachers, $600 for brand new teachers to outfit their classrooms with really anything they want, and that's really the primary function of GIBIS, is we give teachers the leeway to purchase things that they need for their classroom to improve the educational experience for our students. So that money is what will be used in that way, and additionally, school bus field trips, other things that come up throughout the year that teachers and administrators at Fairview need to improve the educational experience for CPS students at Fairview. So that is our request, and we would be happy to answer any committee has.
Cool. Thank you. Any questions?
I do not have any questions. It's a great event.
Do you have any questions, Ms. Bolton? Sorry.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Mhm.
Do you have to speak German in order to get the beer?
Oh, gosh. Yes, you do.
Stop.
Just say Danke. Just say Danke.
Danke.
Yeah, all you have to say is
That is
Danke. We'll put it on a big sign so everyone feels included.
It is an awesome event, and it's going to be quite a bender of a weekend the day after St. Patrick's Day, right into Flushing. So we'll have our Irish and then our German back to back. At least I will. That's wonderful. Yeah, high grain is awesome too. That sounds great. So we will, unless there's any objection from the committee, we'll put this before the board at our next board meeting to approve it, and then we'll get you that signature. And Dan, who ends up signing those from the state of Ohio?
Our office does.
Okay.
And that would be, we'll grant the waiver, and then you guys will, cool.
Okay, with
That's
you
right.
then. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, we'll have it in time, hopefully.
They don't have to appear at the board meeting to get it done unless you want
No.
to, but it's
No.
not necessary.
Yeah.
Unless you serve refreshments outside.
Okay. Okay. Thank you all so much for being here. You're welcome to stick around, or you can leave. It's really exciting. We're having a really good time, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Next order of business. So we are already, this new policy and equity team is already smoking right along. Our next agenda item is approval of our committee meeting schedule, which at present is the third Friday, 9 to 10:30 a.m. And I just need approval from my colleagues. Ms. Bolton, this is the same as last year, as you know, and then Ms. Weinberg, does this work for folks still?
Works very well for me.
Works for me, and I have it in my calendar
Finance.
with the correct time.
That's great.
9 to 10:30.
See ya.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you,
y'all.
ladies.
Thanks so much. Yep. Great. So item number 3, done. And also welcome to our superintendent, Ironetta Wright, and our president of the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers, Julie Sellers, our 2 new guests. Next up is the committee 2023 work plan. If folks are comfortable doing it, and I totally understand and respect if folks are not, and we want to look at this and bring it back February, we can. There's no pressing need to get this before the board at our next meeting to approve it. But you have it in front of you. If you've already looked through all of this and feel good about it, I would probably like a little more time with it, but I want to see if there are any questions about the work plan as it stands.
So for me, the first time kind of looking over this, I did review it. I did not have any questions, but I am open to waiting so that you can
Okay.
have a chance to kind of dive a little deeper into it.
Thank you, Ms. Weinberg. Ms. Bolton?
Yes, I'd like to have a month or so to look at it. I do think, too, for our new member, 2 years ago, I believe when Mr. Lindy was a member, I kind of had to do it not by year, but by member who was sitting at the panel.
Right.
We created a list of policies that said board work versus administration. I know staff still has that, and I think it's of use, and it's attached to this, which kind of makes sense, and we really may want to review that as well when we review the long list, and that would be,
So who can send that out?
yeah.
I don't think I've seen that out.
Yeah, I don't have it either.
So it is, we still have that. No, the one that's attached in here is more about the work and more about the philosophy. This is for the board. So at the top here of this list, this is just board stuff. So this is like the work we do and then the philosophy of the district. But there was also a list, and I'll look through my files, and then I'll ask general counsel's office as well, because that was when Ben was on the committee, and we sort of looked. We tried to do an effort of like some of these, quite frankly, Ms. Bolton brought it up, like this is more administrative and guiding the administration. We don't necessarily, and then we took our list and split it up into work versus philosophy, which I thought was a valuable exercise. So if we could find that again, that'd be good. Okay.
Perfect.
I think one of the, I don't know if I need to.
Yeah.
Do I? Okay. I think one of the things, Chair Morosky, that I would like for us to possibly discuss at some point is, as we're in this vein of auditing everything that we do, having a more comprehensive audit of our current policies. I know years ago we worked with an organization called Neola. I know there are different schools of thoughts around working with Neola, but they do have and they maintain really some of the current guidance and guidelines and oversight and comparison of policies to what's happening across Ohio, and even greater than that, what's happening across the country. So it may be something to think about at some point in terms of an audit, just to see, you know, what we have, where some areas, and when I look through some of the policies, and some of them, the committee has been dealing with quite a bit, you know, since May. But looking at the date on some of the policies and the last time they were updated, there may be some that we might want to move a little faster on. So it may be something for further discussion.
Yeah.
Superintendent Wright, can you say the name of the group?
Neola, Neola.
I'm certainly amenable to that. And when we talk about an audit, so when President Lindy was on the committee, and we sort of did an audit of just the efficacy of some of the policies. Would this Neola audit be more of a global sort of, where are the gaps within the policies that we do have? Or do we need new policies? Do we need less policies?
I don't know if there's ever a recommendation for less, because that's always at the discretion of the board. But I think what we might see, in having worked with them in the past, is they start kind of with, and many of our policies are set up like that right now, but they start kind of with a framework of policies. And then from there, really beginning to look at what we currently have, some areas that we might be missing that we may want to address sooner, as, you know, a rotational model. So it's just something to consider.
And I just have an additional question. So with the responsibilities of this committee, I see here that we were basically supposed to ensure that each policy is reviewed at least once every 3 years, but you're saying a more deeper dive.
Correct. I'm saying as we look at the policies, you know, while there are several policies that we've discussed as I've been attending the meetings, that it's been years, you know, since they have been reviewed. Yeah. So it's really an opportunity not to work simultaneously with the committee, but really to on their own kind of do the review and present it to the committee for the committee to consider.
And it would be, I think, Ms. Weinberg, as opposed to like the standard review that we do. And oftentimes, as you know, from being on the board for the past year, oftentimes we're going through and realize, well, one of these needs to be held up. We need to talk more about this. Whereas a lot of them are, you know, we clean up language, add the legal language that has to be there, and then keep it moving. Some we stick on, like the three we're about to talk about. This, however, would look at all of them and say, where do we have gaps? Do we have a gap in the area of equity? And we don't. I had to use that because it's always on our mind. I think we have that covered really well. But, you know, do we have a gap in area HR? Do we have a gap in that sort of thing?
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, brief history, since that's my role. I
Ms.
would
Bates
say,
can do that.
yeah, I would say that 20 years ago through about 12 years ago, we used Neola as a district, and then and used it well. But then within the board, especially led by Kathy Ingram, the board reasserted itself as getting rid of Neola, not because of bad performance or anything, but because there had been such a history of the board actually writing its own policy. And so I think a general review of where the gaps are is a great idea. Hopefully that will impact our cycle that we have to move, if nothing else. And also might want to see too what they don't have that we do, because it works both ways. But our review is fine. It requires a contract though for them to do that.
I've obviously not done any inquiry. It's just from past experiences, and thought this would be the time, since we're talking about, you know, organization of the committee for this year. This would be the time to bring it up for discussion. I think we would follow up with our general counsel and let him do any additional research and work with him, because he would be, you know, the point person that they would be aligned with.
I just would suggest to Neola, since they always want our business, that we need them to look at the overall and give us that direction. It's kind of a narrow thing. It's not like we're going to be signing them all. Well, and we might after they show what we need to do.
I think that's right.
But make it as that narrow. I think we need.
Yeah.
I think they may have the expertise. I think that it's clear that I really believe in audit. It's really important to see where you are as you're determining where you go. They may be able to give the board, use that level of expertise. Is it something that our general counsel's office could do if they had a one dedicated person that was just focusing on that? Likely so, but with the other work that the office has to do, it makes it a bit of a challenge. So really, I think it would just give the board some additional information about how to move forward.
Does that include, do they review guidelines as well, administrative guidelines, or they just review the policy? Do we know?
I think they can. It's a matter of what we ask for them to do. I think we know that we've identified that we are in deficit or in a deficit is a good choice of words, I think, when we are moving through the guidelines that go along with many of the policies. And so, we're able to, we're moving along in the area, but there's a lot of update that still needs to be done.
Yeah, I believe that Superintendent Mitchell had the staff, I think her first year or something, go through most of them, and that's what she found too, was that we were low in guidelines, and frankly, guidelines haven't been generally shared with the board over the years, and that's true of many school districts where we write the policy, but we don't know what the guidelines are. So I think it would be maybe something for them to look at, or for us to know how many were behind or whatever. It'd be great.
I like that idea as well. Yeah.
I'll just look it up.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Thanks, Phyllis.
They do them. I think it's really important that it's in terms of in the vein of audit, just to your point about, the policy and the policy, the litany of policies they have. I think there's still something really important about us having our guidelines that are representative of what we're looking for in CPS. And so it's, they can do the audit around that, but I think from there, it really would be something that we would look at how we move forward as leadership to do it.
Yeah, that would be the same about the policies.
Exactly.
Everything has to get sensified.
Right.
I love it. It's a good word. So are we comfortable then, moving this conversation ahead? Yes. I think, okay. Yeah.
I am. And also, if you recall, last year, there was some confusion on the whole board about the role that policy was playing. Was it too expansive? Was it too narrow? So I think we probably need to, as we look at our work plan, think about addressing that if that is still an issue. It was an issue, I think, among a couple board members. The other piece particularly was the whole enrollment piece, too. There was some confusion about enrollment and capacity. Why was that in policy rather than someplace else? So that was the only one that I can remember.
Those were the only ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Appreciate it. Good conversation. Ms. Weinberg, good? Good. Ms. Bolton, good? All right. Well, then we'll dive into the three policies that will kick off this year. And Ms. Bolton was fond of saying last year that we have been doing, or past couple years, we've been doing really big work in this committee, and we have. And I think our first three policies we're going to look at this year are evidence of that. These are not small items. And so policy 2440 is extended learning opportunities. This was born out of questions about summer school offerings. Ms. Bolton had a number of questions about it, and Dr. Moffitt, who was on this committee last year, also had a number of questions and concerns regarding, equity, and was there a standard process at schools, i.e. some schools charging for summer school, some schools not, et cetera, and these were all super valid, and we agreed we need to take a deeper dive. And so here we are, and I will turn this over to General Counsel's office to see if there are any updates to kick us off, and then my colleagues to continue the conversation.
Thanks. Sure. We will. I'll bring this up on the screen. Made some of the updates, or made the updates that were discussed in policy committee last month. Let me bring this up. As well, Board Member Bolton advised, I think, during last policy committee meeting that she had some suggestions, and so we've added those as well. Glad to take your questions. Again, that last month we had discussed removing the sort of requirement to charge tuition to students who were required to participate in summer school. So that's been removed at this point. There was a suggestion or a direction to add a reference to our ESY programs. That's extended school year for students with disabilities. We added a paragraph on that. Spelled out CCIP, Comprehensive Continuous Improvement Plan. Glad to answer any questions about this policy.
Dan?
Ms. Weinberg?
Yes, I just have one quick question, and I'm not sure either of the two of you can answer, but what was the reason of the choice for selecting grades 5 through 12?
Yeah.
There's an email circulating, but my interest was previously we hadn't been offering prior to third grade reading requirement and prior to summer scholars, prior to fifth quarter, as it was once called, which was strictly enhancement. We were not offering any kind of summer experience for preschool or early learning. And also based upon the way the policy is written, which emphasizes the whole academic piece, I put forward the idea of does all levels mean all levels? Mm-hmm. And it had grown into that. And I don't know that that is within the mission or the financial capacity of the district to offer a full, K-12 summer experience, especially since we do have so many issues. So I throw that out there. Would it be 5 through 8 or is it a 9 through 12? The reason was really credit, people getting credit if they were behind credit or if people were failing school. We made some sort of philosophical decision that we didn't want it to be so negative, that it needed to be more proactive. So I just think that all levels, I wasn't even sure if that meant grades or if that meant intellectual status where people were. So I thought that would be ripe for discussion. And other things that concerned us, I think, was the insistence of in-person for summer school. I don't understand the necessity for that. I know that many kids benefit greatly, and maybe that's special, but I don't think that it's within our capacity, certainly within our authority, as the general counsel's pointed out, to insist on that. But I don't know and don't understand why it so varies from building to building. I don't know why we don't make use of the fortune we've invested into technology and professional development for our staff to be able to do it. I don't know why some of this doesn't happen during the school year rather than the summer. So I thought that it would be important. And we've had some discouraging stories be told regarding, what if it's a medical issue? What if it's an internship issue? I think you and I've talked briefly about that. Because there are many educational opportunities and personal conditions that would prevent young people from being able to do it or families being able to do it. And it seems to me that there needs to be special dispensation. I also believe that it's a decision, since it's a board policy, I believe that the superintendent, and if that superintendent wants to designate other people, certainly that's whether it's the academic officer or whomever, that people ought to be able to submit a request for a delay. I think also it's weird to insist, I know of one example where it ended up that the one student, for all intents and purposes, the only thing that was offered was a quarter of Spanish. And somehow that was enough to say the internship looks better. So how broad is the offering that we can even afford to be able to, if you're going to have 12 months school, have 12 months school. So I just thought that there were things that, as you say, looking back is the last time we reviewed this or looked at it. We fortunately were able to ask you what CCIC or something is, and come to find out it impacts what the treasurer has to do when watching grants and what have you. So I just think that we need to have a very, very muscular policy because of what I hear from around the district. So
I would agree as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton. Ms. Sellers?
So are you saying that the change of policy would mean we wouldn't have summer learning or anything in the
No.
summer for K to 3?
Maybe. I don't know. That's a proposal. I've had so many people tell me for the little ones, it is more, well, for example, it really is providing a good, safe place for them, for sure. But whether or not there's learning, just like as we went through with the whole COVID experience, offering it, remotely for proposed difficulty. I'm putting it out there.
You're saying all summer would be remote?
No.
Not all.
As an option.
It's in person.
As an option that you wouldn't have to. I mean, the wording that was proposed down here from Ms. Bolton, while both in-person and virtual instruction may be offered, in-person learning cannot be required unless required by IEPs or 504s. And this is just a suggestion right now. And then the other one, to Ms. Sellers' question, K through 3, it would actually be K through 4 with that suggestion, right? Because this is 5 through 12. And I think, yeah, okay.
Russians, so they were able to then start the next back instead of falling behind like the whole summer.
Respond to that.
Yeah,
Then
go
have
for
a
it.
summer
Go ahead.
reading program
Okay.
rather than necessarily describe it as summer school or necessarily describe it as summer scholars. Narrow what it is you're trying to do because we're not getting the results.
Yeah,
We are
no.
not getting the
Yeah,
results.
that
We're
makes sense.
spending millions of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And the summer, and I was going to actually bring that up too, what Ms. Sellers brought. And can we make sure the air conditioning isn't on?
I know,
It's
it's
freezing
freezing.
cold outside. Thank you so much. I was like, what is happening? Okay, so thank you for the scarf.
I was freezing.
Thanks for that scarf. I was going to say something about that as well. I mean, everybody that knows me, even sort of well, knows that the summer learning loss is top of mind for me, particularly for our kids experiencing homelessness, et cetera. And so the idea of what you just said, I find personally, and I think professionally, far more attractive of having an explicit reading program in the summer, an opt-in perhaps reading program in the summertime for the younger kids that are most in need of it at that first, second grade. Well, we can have both. Well, I'm saying, sorry, let me rephrase that. You can have the mandate, but then also an opt-in. So like if a family does want extra opportunity, sorry, yeah, both, my bad. That is far more attractive to me because to Ms. Bolton's point, I just want to put a fine point on it and then I'll be quiet for my piece because I like the additions, but there is a lot of money that quite frankly isn't getting results. And I don't think that's a really radical aha moment for anybody, but go ahead.
A significant amount of the money that we're spending also is going to our partners for their programming. And that's great. Much of it's great. I think it's fabulous. But it also is something that needs greater review. I would also, our little family, we have 2 elementary kids, one ready to make the big choice and is already signed in and hopefully gets in, but have enjoyed summer scholars. And it's been one is more struggling than the other. So it's been not only the academic, but the enhancement piece. But I would like to see actually, as Julie points out, the kids that need it the most. The reality is I'd like to see how many actual kids that are economically disadvantaged based upon the percentage of our schools as they are in our schools. Does that match the kids that participated in summer school? Because so much of what I heard was that the kids that were participating the most were the kids that actually needed it the least, especially in the enhancement piece. So, I mean, that's something. I just think this is a major place to review, and this is the year to do it. And hopefully, as it starts with the administration auditing and reevaluating and what have you, I know the treasurers expressed concerns the first year and the second year regarding the monies and what have you. But this is... it would seem to me that everything is on the table as we look at results.
Ms. Weinberg?
And just to add in, I agree with both of my colleagues. Definitely, we have to look at helping our struggling readers. And so in terms of a type of summer program, if it's not going to be summer scholars, it needs to be something that is geared and directed towards literacy, and especially for our young readers, so that we can showcase the data and show that they're progressing and improving. So that's very important.
Well, and this is timely as well because falls right in line with one of our goals that we just approved.
Yes.
So if it's all the same, I'm going to make a suggestion and then look to both my colleagues for approval or denial that we bring this back again in February. We go ahead and I'm just going to say add this proposed language. We can chop it up. We don't need to keep it all, but bring it back so we can see it together and we can kind of go through it line by line and then ideally the end of February, beginning of March, put it before the board.
I welcome that. I agree with that, and I'm interested in having the administration, get their oar in as well as to what is actually needed, not needed, or how
that
we
would be
can
good
reshape.
too. Yeah.
And then the is children and teenagers first.
Yeah.
Instead of building it always around the grown-ups in the system. I would like to have families have the choice of helping figure out what is the option for them. So I think choice is part of it.
So
We've got Superintendent and Ms. Sellers.
A couple things that I would just interject or I would recommend. My thoughts would be that we consider making the grade levels more broad because it gives the opportunity administratively for the administration to then utilize the data to determine where the additional support comes from. That's number one. Number two, as we think about what is best across the board, nationally, the percentage of students that attend summer school in any school district is generally less than 20%. And so if you are looking at how you're looking to serve students through extended learning opportunities, in most places, it's a mandate, but often an unfunded mandate. The third is what happens, and just looking at just years and years and years of research around it, you're looking for opportunities to extend learning, to do remediation, and to possibly do interventions. But the truth is, unless we mandate summer school during the summer, we will never get the students in summer school that need summer school the most. That's it's just true. And so I think that as we think about policy, if we could consider some level of breadth within the policy to give the administration the opportunity to then utilize what we know to be best practice. Both of them, it does not always get us what we're needing to try to get those credits caught up before they move to the next level. Is that comfortable always for adults? It is not comfortable for adults. But have I found it to be the most effective for students? I would also say yes to that. So that would be my only recommendation.
Absolutely. Okay. It seemed taken well by everyone.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
I don't see anything that is said there except the mandate piece, but the options available. I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
And I just have one quick question
go for
the
it,
superintendent. Just curious, what grade span would you be
Good question.
in expanding it out to?
So, when I say expanding, I think about opportunity. I honestly think much less than third grade is a challenge. I think that it becomes a safe place to Board Member Bolton's point for students to be. But collectively, the efficacy of what happens during that time, we can talk about summer slide, we can talk about not having the loss during the summer. But when we look at really what happens with data across the board, those 18 days or so that students are involved in that instruction, sometimes for a half a day, Is that really giving the additional level of focus and support that's needed? So I really think that the opportunity to, and for programs that we do have, making them an intensive focus on ELA or reading and math, so that for whatever time period students are in school, anything else is integrated. We have attempted to do all, and really making it focused intimately on reading and math, where you're looking at high leverage standards, you're looking at reading deficit specifically, and then you're doing a rotational model in class that allows intervention to happen as well. So I would venture to say, if it was a perfect scenario, I would venture to say that we would look at third grade. We would determine whether or not we were using summer for promotion. We've had the conversation around promotion, but summer for promotion for our students that are at the 5th grade level or higher in terms of promotional opportunities. And then looking specifically at high school for how we're needing to address course recovery so that our students are not getting further behind.
Thank you.
And then Ms. Sellers, and then
When we used to have summer school that was even kind of mandatory even for early, like the primary grades. We didn't handle that at every single school.
Agreed.
They looked at the schools that needed it the most, but those programs were open to kids in magnet schools or other schools. And then we had a very strict guideline of, because there were less offerings of that, we wanted firstly teachers, people who were certified in reading, who had reading endorsements working with those kids in the summer. Because right now when you have so many classrooms that sometimes they were subs, sometimes they weren't certified, and I don't see where that is as expensive as a teacher who is certified as a reading specialist.
And one of the things that I have shared with the board, this is the last thing I'll say, in working in partnership with the treasurer, I would agree, and we have gone through every line of everything that we have in terms of finance. We spent $15 million last year on summer. We spent $550 per child for enrichment. That's a challenge. And so that's going to make some people very uncomfortable when I make an alternate recommendation for that. But we have to be better fiscal managers when we think about what it is that we're doing for our students. So one of the proposals that we have right now that we're socializing with the team and we've talked to principals about is reducing the number of sites dramatically. Last year we had 65 schools. We had 7,500 students that were signed up, and we know that there is no situation where 7,500 students reported every day just because they were signed up. And so across the district, we really want to make sure that by next month, by the beginning of February, we're able to send out information for recommendations around summer. But my expectation is that it will look dramatically different than it did last year, and I think it's necessary.
And I think that one of the things that we used to do that I thought was very effective, as you're having those conversations with the parents in conferences, you can start in February, like your child's probably, if they don't get, their work in, this is going to be a mandate. I think that is an incentive for kids to get their work done during the year.
all right. So we will bring this back. This was an awesome conversation, in my opinion. Members, are we good? Ms. Weinberg and Ms. Bolton?
Yes.
Okay. And Superintendent, General Counsel, everyone feels comfortable. Ms. Sellers, thank you for your comments. All right. Excellent. So the next policy, Ms. Wright teed this up in a way, academic acceleration. In some ways, we took this out. We had the acceleration, retention, promotion was all one big policy, just bring everyone back up to speed. This committee took out acceleration, and the board has since approved our new revised promotion policy at our last meeting. Ms. Bolton and Dr. Moffitt and I agreed that this one, however, still needed further discussion. And so we are here, and as always, I will turn it over to General Counsel Office to see if they have any updates, and then we can chat. Do you have a question first?
I do have a quick question. So the only policy that you went over was promotion. Did you also discuss retention as well?
Yeah.
Yes.
So did you update retention as well a little bit? Okay, never mind.
Yeah, this is the old one.
Yeah. So,
So wait, this is an academic acceleration then.
Yeah.
No, that's the one that we did. This is the promotion
Acceleration's
retention.
already
Sorry.
gone through.
That's right.
Okay.
Everything I said was right except replace acceleration with promotion retention every single time.
So we are discussing
Correct.
promotion and retention.
Correct. The agenda.
Just wanted to make sure.
Totally fine. That is my fault, Ms. Davis. I see Ms. Davis' inquisitive look. You're totally fine. It's a total just goof. Yes. So the acceleration one is the one that we passed.
Yes.
We took that out,
That's right.
and now we're back here. Thank you.
Acceleration was peeled out, put in a separate policy.
Totally.
Graduation plans was pulled out, put in a separate
Right.
policy. The
Okay.
one that still required discussion was promotion retention,
Very
and that's what's on the agenda today. I'll share our screen again.
I will not be upset when I have to stop saying promotion, acceleration, and retention over and over and over again, because I clearly am starting to get them muddied up in my brain.
I do think this is an important thing that
Yes.
the committee and the administration was doing, was separating this monstrous
Big time.
monstrous
It was a
and
mess.
actually questionable policy. And indeed, it's one of the areas I think that the teachers and the CFT brought to us regarding retention, that we literally were codifying social promotion in our policy.
And that's the piece that I think policy committee asked to pause for a discussion with the full board or whatever, but that I've highlighted in the first kind of 3 paragraphs where that's codified. And I don't know, that is still in the policy, that sort of codified social promotion.
Wait, let me look at my watch
Yeah. Okay.
to see how long it's still going to be there.
Yeah, that's I think the major point of discussion still. The retention piece was updated to just emphasize that parents be a part of that process. Also, I think board member Bolton mentioned that consideration should be given where possible to partial retention and remediation, not just like a full grade level retention. And there was, I think board member Moffitt had asked, or someone had asked to include school counselors, parent family advocates, or a school ombudsperson in that process where appropriate. So I don't know that there's any further discussion needed on the retention piece. I believe it was that promotion kind of area. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Yes, I have a couple questions on the retention. Just with me being a new member to the policy committee, what is partial retention?
Partial retention is, I think it's a term I invented. It just means that licensify. I know it's called that someplace, but because I've seen it. But it's basically grade status. That indeed, like in high school, you may be in a junior homeroom, but you may not yet be taking all of junior classes, or something like that. So it's not that you hold a child or a teenager back for a full year. They have reached some level or some status, and it's hard to manage and what have you. But the reality is this board just years ago said we weren't going to retain anybody. So this is a big culture shift, and especially if we're looking at summer school too, we have to get all these things kind of in line because we are now demanding more, or would be demanding a significantly different academic culture than we have had. So that's what it is. It's the grade status or the coursework that's being done. They don't lose their status. However, we would, the administration and the district would fashion that.
Okay, and I was just going to say, just with myself being a former teacher, I would just be a little concerned with elementary, as you're going into the elementary low grades, explaining what partial retention is.
Sure.
So that would just be my concern.
Thank you, Ms. Weinberg.
So if I could add, generally with partial promotion, that generally shows up after students start earning credits. So when
Promotion
you think
or retention?
promotion, so
Okay.
partial promotion. So
But I'm okay.
partial promotion or retention is
Okay.
really the same thing. It's right. It's either saying that. So essentially, what happens is in a younger grade where they're not earning credits, it's generally aligned to the number of classes that students pass. So it really moves from the policy being broad enough that it then allows the administration to create administrative guidelines, which are generally known as a student progression plan, which we do not have as a district right now. We are working on a draft that we hope to have by by February, but essentially it looks at how many courses a student needs to pass during the year to promote to the next grade before you get to credits. When you get to credits at the 9th grade, it's really doing the same thing. So instead of just saying a child enters at 9th grade, the next year, they go to 10th grade, the next year they go to 11th grade, it's saying that once you enter as a 9th grader, there is some nuance for what you need to pass within that 9th grade year so that when you go to the next grade level, you may be considered a 10th grader, depending on your courses, or you may be considered a 9th grader still, depending on your courses. The other reason that it's also very important in terms of cohort year once you get to 9th grade is because that's where the cohorts start that have the impact on graduation. And unfortunately, it becomes a flag for students and for families when they're realizing this is really a challenge. So it's not that students are then, at the 12th grade level before they realize I don't have enough credits to graduate within the 4 years, but it's a constant reminder. And then there has to be clear guidance around what courses need to be passed. So it is doable. It is something that most places do. And so really it's moving us forward in terms of that process. And then we add the administrative guidelines to make sure that happens. And then you have to make sure that it's in the student information system, but it works.
And the way you explained it there, I get it. But now I'm thinking, okay, you have a 2nd grader who has failed 4 of their subjects. Then for 3rd grade, are you saying that 2nd grader takes classes over from 2nd grade, but then still takes 3rd grade? So that's where I was a little confused.
It depends on the guidance. It depends on what's put in the guidelines.
So
so there may be a lot of conversations before you get to the 3rd grade. There are a lot of conversations around what else happens with students in terms of additional remediation, extended opportunities for learning, so that the goal is really not to retain them if at all possible, especially at the younger ages. You do also have to think about ages and those kinds of things, but there are some core requirements that is really important for students to have as we think about where they go next. So it's a fascinating conversation to have, but
yes.
I applaud the board because it's the right conversation.
Thank you.
I'm going to see Ms. Bolton and then Ms. Sellers, I know, has something to say. You have anything?
I'm just happy that we are addressing this particular deficit within our instructional program.
Yeah.
And I think very readily that one of the reasons we have this current policy is that the administration was not interested in creating that program.
The other thing that I would add to that I do think is really important is after we go through the policy process, I think that it is important, much like we do the code of conduct, that we bring the student progression plan to the board for approval as a part or an addendum to the policy, so that there's clarity across the board about what is included, how it's included, and it gives the board, it becomes the administrative guideline, but it really also becomes the policy for the district because the progression plan is reviewed, there's an update process and all of those things. So I really think that that's something for us to consider adding as well.
Mike, just one last thing for me. Part of it is also the state requires sort of individualized, not just IEPs for kids that have particular challenges, but the assumption at the state is that school districts are doing this. That, as what we just discussed, is part of the larger plan. Something that Mr. Morosky and I and Ozzie Davis and whoever, that every kid has sort of an individual plan to get through. And this is a strategy to make that happen.
Absolutely. Ms. Sellers?
I think one of the things that got policy is reference to was in the state revised code 3313. The policy prohibits the promotion of a student to the next grade level if a student has been truant for more than 10% of the school year. And that is happening many times, and that was when we were talking about attendance and making sure we had the attendance, because if kids aren't in school, they're not learning. And I really do think that we need to have some kind of way to address this. Yeah. But you have to put plans in place. You have to notify parents. You have to let the parents have an understanding that how important the attendance is. All of that is in this section, and it starts on page 36 of, I think I sent everybody these state guidelines and laws. And so I really think that that would change the whole mindset of our whole community if the kids know they have to be in school.
And if it was embedded in the policy, I think that makes sense to make an allusion to the ORC.
It's supposed to be in the policy.
Yeah, Ms. Weinberg.
I actually was going to bring that up. I printed off a little revised code. So thank you for that. It was like you were reading my mind. But yes, they do discuss.
Yeah.
So.
Could I ask a technical question? Does
Yeah.
that pertain that 10%, and very frankly, we won't say this publicly, but it impacts every one of our schools, and certainly we have our transportation issues. We have post-COVID experiences that have made things very, very difficult. But does that 10% pertain to what we classify on our calendar as instructional days, or does it count as do you have to count actually when the students are in contact? Which is it?
Yeah, it says
So the
reported
reality
attendance
is we have
days.
we have several more instructional days than we actually have student contact days.
How are you defining student contact days? So instructional days, we have 180.
The students are there, yes, but they're not all contact.
What do you have? How so?
It's aligned to the overall school year. So to answer your question, so
Okay.
in terms of, we have 180-day school year. So anything in terms of 10% related chronic, this is really the alignment for the national definition of chronic absenteeism.
Right.
So chronic absenteeism is being absent more than 10% of the overall school year. So if a child is absent, regardless of how many contact days you
That's
have,
what I wanted
if a child
to
is
know.
absent more than those 18 days, which it would be for us, so at their 19th day, they're considered chronically absent.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right. Julie, do you have anything to add?
Well, there are things in here that go along with that of the responsibility of the district with the parent communication, including having a parenting class around student attendance.
Do most school districts have, I think it fits into this policy for sure, but do we have a truancy policy? And so there's that would have to be, if we look to the future, that one would have to be beefed up based upon what President Sellers is saying. So that might want to, if it pleases Ms. Weinberg, maybe we have to look at the truancy piece, truancy policy, the next time as we look like, I asked about whether or not we had a truancy policy as well. We do, that might have to be reviewed as well.
And I also think that if we could spell this out before we send home the code of conduct, so that parents have a copy of that, I think that's important. So that
That's smart.
That as a reference.
I agree, but also we want to try to do as much as we can not to do procedure within the policy. That's the ghost of Melanie Bates speaking from Antarctica, which I believe is where she is.
She's
She back?
I thought of her. I went to the Dinosaurs of Antarctica exhibit at Museum Center yesterday.
And you thought of Melanie
I thought
Bates?
of Bates down there in like a tent.
Well, the procedure, I think, all that stuff all of this has to be PR'd. For sure.
And I think the way that we do Board Member Bolton's point, and I appreciate you sharing that and continuing to
It got stuck
remind
in
the
my
team.
throat, but
I
I
appreciate
said
it because again, it does give us the delineation that we've been working on as a board and superintendent team between board work and leadership work. And so in terms of doing that, the board sets the policy. The way that the policy is done and implemented really is in alignment with what the work is of the leadership. So I know that has not always happened in the past, and I think the board is doing a really great job in trying to make sure that we are clearing that up as we move forward.
Another good discussion.
Part of that is because many boards over 15 years never saw guidelines until Superintendent Mitchell, thank goodness. So we screwed up a lot, I'm sure, not even knowing what the procedures were or that there were any. I appreciate that.
So, any other comments? No.
That's it.
Does this move forward or what are we?
Well, I was going to suggest, and then I'll see what Ms. Weinberg was going to say this might be aligned, but my suggestion was going to be to bring this back with the truancy policy, and then Mr. Hoying, if we could maybe allude to, can I see what number is that in the ORC, whatever section that is? Yep. Include that maybe somewhere in the retention piece, and then bring this back one more time with the truancy policy, just to look at them side by side, and then we may end up moving this one right forward and hang on to truancy. We might end up, because I heard you say something about combining, perhaps. We'll see. But bring this back one more time. Is that fair?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
If everyone else is.
Cool. Yeah. All right.
Because we get to see it again, so.
Yeah.
And hopefully we pass it.
Yeah.
Go on.
And then I think, and then it would be in time, because while we don't get into the administrative stuff, one of our goals of this board, I would say broadly, and in this committee certainly over the past 2 years has come up a lot, and certainly with COVID, a renewed sort of attention paid on attendance. I do think there is a power in this policy for the administration to use to push
And it is
that.
one of our goals.
Yeah. Great.
Because that goal was.
Yep. Excellent. So the last policy we have to discuss today is a school behavioral threat assessment. This was born out of, it's listed on the agenda as weapons. This was born out of inquiry I made a while ago, a couple of meetings ago now, I think, regarding what our process was for threats. This is not unique to Cincinnati Public School District or even unique to urban school districts, happening all over the country, these phony threats being called in. And it's been alarming, the rate at which they have. So Miss Stephanie Scott, as she has done since she started working here, right at the beginning of COVID, has been charged with drafting brand new policies. Anti-racism is under her belt, the vaccination policy, just light stuff. Not big stuff at all, just the only only ones of their kind. Yeah.
Stephanie did it.
No, if you're mad about it, send me emails. I know you will anyway. You can pick on me. So anyhow, we're going to look at this draft. We've had a couple drafts of this, and then if you are watching, 2 people who are watching, assuming you're not part of the superintendent's team or the treasurer's team, if you would like to speak, raise your hand now, because you will have an opportunity to speak here in a few minutes, and state your name, your business, and your school affiliation, please. So I'll kick it over to Ms. Scott for school behavioral threat assessment. Thank you for your work on this.
No, yes, thank you for you all's guidance and vision on this. As we discussed at the last December's meeting, House Bill 123 requires school to have a school threat assessment according to ORC 5502.263, which is notated in last month's minutes. And basically, there was a recommendation, or there was a model threat assessment kind of model policy and plan that was introduced by the Ohio Department of Safety. And so basically what we did in this policy is tried to synthesize that policy. It was basically the plan itself on the recommendations is probably a pretty significant page document. So what we tried to do was synthesize kind of the main objectives of what a threat assessment policy should be, but understanding there's a lot left in that plan that probably would fall more into a procedural guideline that would need to, basically follow up this policy, as we've been discussing today in regards to other policies too. So, but what we tried to do is just highlight kind of the reasoning behind it and the state law, and then emphasizing the main points about it being a behavioral-based approach. We included kind of the equity statement that the board had asked for last month. That's in the third policy. And then just trying to, again, pull out the highlights, distinguishing this from our regular student discipline, although the language in here, when necessary, does mimic our code of conduct. You'll see information in here about searches and things like that, but that information is no different than what we already have in our code of conduct. But again, just kind of highlighting and distinguishing it from when it would involve students, and if students were involved in kind of a threat situation. So addressing kind of the information sharing and also additional considerations around the IDEA and things of that nature. So we'll welcome any questions. And again, this is a first draft, so it's a work in motion. So if there's more information or additional things that we want included.
It is, thank you, Ms. Scott, and I'll go to my colleagues, but I would like to say just first, I really appreciate the third paragraph. I know I was kind of bullish about that when we were talking about, using Columbus's guidance, who I don't have a whole lot of faith in, as we all know. I really appreciate this third paragraph. To assess individuals who demonstrate concerning communications or behavior does not tolerate profiling of any kind based on race, ethnicity, age, physical or mental health conditions, learning disabilities, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual orientation, or religion. Just wanted to highlight that. Thank you for that. And then turn to my colleagues, Ms. Weinberg.
I think the draft looks good. I have no comments, and I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weinberg. Ms. Bolton.
Yeah, I think the draft looks very good, and I'm very appreciative of it. I still have, I'm just expressing for the first time, the issue of mental health. I mean, and now that the nation's been rocked by, again, the gun violence of a little person against a teacher. I mean, this is broader than all of that, but the mental health piece, because of all that kind of, how do you proceed regarding a threat piece and not be so aware of mental health issues?
Well, the actual model, the full model plan that's being recommended, it like I said, some of this is procedural, but it suggests that the actual threat assessment team be a multidisciplinary team, and that team would include mental health professionals. So you would have teachers, counselors, school resource officers, school psychologists, administrators. So as a part of this threat assessment that would need to take place, there needs to be a threat assessment team that would be established, and it would include those type of people or it's suggested as part of the model policy that those individuals will be a part of that team. So I don't know if we want to include that language in here. We can add that the team would be multidisciplinary.
I just know it's difficult for people to talk about it and not feel like they're breaking the law. And also, does every one of our school buildings, we know that all of our school buildings have the instructional leadership team, but does every one of our school buildings have what that is student focused, meaning let's kind of look and see how our kids are doing, or how I'm worried about this kid, or I mean, some smaller schools do that where there's a group of teachers and other teachers refer to that group concerns that they may have about a kid, and then that group talks about that. I just wonder on the mental health piece.
Well, as far as right now, I'm not exactly sure. I'll defer to the superintendent and Dan if they're aware of internally, but I know we have systems in place within our schools. I don't necessarily know if we have a team. I mean, so there's system and mechanism in places that where, school staff and so forth are concerned about those things. Then we also have our gaggle system that is currently in place too, that when our students are, communicating back and forth, if there's, keywords that jump out, that's elevated and things of that nature. So I think we have systems in place that addressing what you're talking about. I don't necessarily know if it's structured around a team or something like that. So I mean, that's a recommendation.
There's a reporting line and individual, but I wonder who then is in the position to make a determination.
So I don't think, and I want to make sure that I work with the team a little bit because this one is new to me. Yeah. And so when we start talking about teams, we also have to think about the staffing that's in the building. So currently, when we would have an issue where there is a challenge or a threat that occurs in the school, all of our schools have school social workers. And generally, that's one of the first lines of defense in terms of support for what's happening in the school building. It's generally the principal. If there's an assistant principal, the assistant principal, a school counselor, a social worker, and we do have mental health therapists that are assigned to we have a mental health provider that has mental health therapists assigned to the schools, but we do know that we have some schools that have vacancies. And so there is an opportunity for threat assessment to happen within the school building around whether or not students, usually it's more around self-harm type behaviors, as you think about what would be what may cause for additional study. So I think there's some more work that we would want to do around this policy to align some things first and possibly bring it back to discuss next month, if that's okay.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, that would be great.
Ms. Sellers?
What I'm concerned about is whatever that assessment immediately and not drug out over the whole IAT process. And so if it could be something that is separate from IAT, but it could be the same people.
Usually when you think about a threat assessment that's done, you're talking about an action has happened. You have to determine whether or not there is imminent danger. And if so through that process, it is designed to be a quick process. Really, generally, it's a checklist where everyone is trained on the checklist. There's a checklist of information. From that checklist, you then determine what the next steps are. So are the next steps that there needs to be follow up with the family? Is the next step that the child needs to be referred for counseling? Is the next step that there needs to be a visit to the home? So it's designed to be a quick process. So because you have the threat that's already happened, from there, if it's determined that it truly is a mental health issue, then it takes you down a different path versus saying this is a threat that we need to make sure that the SRO is going out to the home or CPD is going out to the home to visit. So there are some inherent things just in what the procedure looks like and what the processes look like that you have to do training around just to be clear that you're getting to the issue. So it's not like a review process where you're determining whether or not a child is going to qualify for special education services. So it's not that kind of assessment. It's really more specific because there has been a threat that's happened. You determine quickly what the next steps are.
And those types of threats are happening with younger students across the country.
Right. I think we all saw the issue that really has caused more alarm with the 6-year-old. So I think that you're definitely correct.
There's been other reports that
Absolutely.
That's not an isolated.
Absolutely not. Correct.
All right, colleagues, good bringing this back?
We're good.
Good bringing it back. Ms. Bolton, do we have anybody? Did any of the two people raise their hands? Okay. So for other business, we don't have hearing of the public, so this will be our last agenda item. Just two quick things from me. Thing number one is, and I hate to do this to people this soon, but does February 24th work for our meeting next month instead of the 17th? And if not, I'm happy to pick another day. I just kept it on Friday. February 24th instead of the 17th. Same time, it's just a week later. Or the 10th if that doesn't work. Is that okay?
That works.
Is that okay for y'all? Okay. So I really appreciate it, y'all. Thank you so much. Yeah. Awesome. That's it. And then the last thing I have is just to make sure we're all on the same page. I always like to do this, as Ms. Bolton knows and Ms. Weinberg will know after today, just to make sure we're on the same page for the beginning of our February agenda. Right now, the beginning of our February agenda is we'll look at those admin board policy breakdown. We'll bring that back. We'll look at the work plan, have a discussion, and then move it out of committee for approval. We're going to bring back all three of these policies. So that's 2440, 5411, and 7217. And as a reminder to myself, 5411 is promotion and retention, not academic acceleration. And that is what I have now. And then, so Ms. Weinberg knows, I know Ms. Bolton knows this, any policy or item that you would like to have on the agenda, if you don't have it top of mind now, email between now and then, and we'll get on the agenda so we can talk about it. So in closing, then, other business from Ms. Bolton, and then.
I think we were in the truancy policy coming
Oh,
back.
God, yeah, sorry. And that too, yes, truancy. Yes, that's on the agenda too. Okay, thank you.
I don't have anything.
All right, well, if you do, as always, let me know. And any final comments? All right, wonderful. We'll have a happy Friday, y'all, and go Browns.
Hooray!
Just kidding. Hooday. Go Bengals. They'll be cheering y'all on. Look. One game, and we came through. All right, see y'all.